You're listening to The Rule of Law, the educational podcast sponsored by Allrise, where we focus on the intersection of law, technology, and storytelling. And now, here's your host, Lauren Round.
Welcome to Rule of Law. In today's episode, we sit down with Stephen Obiajulu, co-founder and chief executive officer of Use Jr. We discuss transitioning from the practice of law to starting a tech company, how AI models are developing their own value systems, and the importance of AI memory. Stephen, welcome to the podcast. Where are you recording from?
Hi, Lauren. I'm calling in from the Bronx here in New York.
Bronx, well, welcome. We always start the show with an icebreaker before we get into the meat of our discussion. So your question is, what is one tech tool that you use in your personal life that you can't live without?
I think probably the most helpful AI tool for me currently is Claude AI.
Okay.
It's just very helpful as like a brainstorming tool.
Cool. Yeah, I heard someone describe these kind of tools earlier as having like an assistant in your pocket or a coach in your pocket. So I've heard that a lot lately.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot to get to, and you're doing a lot of work on AI that I want to ask you about. But before we get there, can you start by telling us a little bit about your background and your journey to starting your own company?
Yeah, sure. So my background is that it's a combination of law and engineering. I'm a lawyer. I come from a family of lawyers. My father's a lawyer. My mother's a lawyer. My sister's a lawyer. My brother-in-law is a lawyer. So there's a lot of lawyers in the family. So that's always been on the radar. I've also always had an interest in technology. I studied mechanical engineering for my undergrad, and then ended up becoming going into patent law at Ropes and Gray. I was there I was working in the patent law group for 5 years, prior to law school for 2 years, and through law school, and then for 6 years as an M&A attorney at Ropes and Gray. And I'd been kind of following AI a little bit from time to time, maybe when GPT 3.5 came out, but I still would see myself primarily as a lawyer and legal practitioner. But then I started to see, and we'll get into the transition, but I started to see the opportunities to improve really the quality of life for the lawyers by using tools to take care of some tasks that large language models can handle well.
Okay, cool. And, like you mentioned, you practiced sort of several years before leaving to pursue your company. And we talk a lot on the show about making that jump to leave the practice of law and go pursue something else. Would you say, despite your background, that was a hard decision for you, or what kind of pushed you over the edge to actually make the move?
It was a very hard decision. I really enjoy the practice of law, and I enjoyed work with my colleagues at Ropes and Gray. They're phenomenal. I think Ropes and Gray has just the best technically capable lawyers of any firm I know of. They recruit heavily from Ropes and Gray. From MIT. Last I checked, they hire the most Harvard Law graduates, and I think probably the most MIT graduates. I think maybe there's one other patent-specific firm that might have more MIT grads, but just very technically capable people at Ropes and Gray. You have people leaving Ropes and Gray to go become, one gentleman left and became a professor of electrical engineering at Berkeley after leaving Ropes and Gray, or the founder of Casetext, which became CoCounsel, that was acquired by Thomson Reuters, and it was Jake Heller. He came through Ropes and Gray, so it was an excellent place to be. And I had an excellent time, and me leaving had nothing to do with not wanting to practice there. Well, there is a long story, but we had tools internally, and that worked very well. And I showed a friend from MIT, David McCaleb, our co-founder, the tool, or I described it, and he just said that this he was willing to invest on condition that I focus full time on developing the tool, and we discussed it with Ropes and Gray, and they were fine with it, and so I left to just further develop this tool that is now Use Junior.
And so you're essentially running a startup now, which, I mean, to most of us seems like a totally different skill set than practicing law. So did you find that there was any skills overlap? I mean, you talked about kind of the technical background of yourself and folks at Ropes and Gray, but what was that skills overlap, if any, or were you kind of finding yourself starting from scratch?
A lot of it did feel like starting from scratch. A lot of coding in the early days, and I didn't really see this as, I saw the idea of Use Junior as something that should be developed, but I did not initially think that I was going to be the person to develop this. So I had a friend from Harvard Law School. I asked him to develop, if he wanted to develop the idea. I described it, and he said it seemed too technically difficult. And then a friend from Harvard Business School, I asked him, because he's actually the CEO of an AI company, I asked if he could roll this into one of his products, and he just said it was difficult. We asked actually a prominent legal tech company to incorporate some of these features that we actually have a subscription for at Ropes, and they looked into it for 2 weeks, but they never really did it. And so like I kind of drew the short straw, and I was the only person kind of left to implement this. And we can talk more about what Use Junior does, but it was a very different task, especially early on, than day-to-day practice of law.
Yeah, I feel like that's it's almost like a hazing ritual in the startup world, where you have to get a certain amount of no's before you get a yes, or else you're not a real founder or something like that. So that sounds consistent with what you went through. Well, I have one more question about you before we move on to kind of the substance of AI. But before we get to that, just to kind of set the foundation, it would be great to hear more specifics about your company, Use Junior, and what it does.
Yeah. And I think and I'll maybe start by talking about the product, which is really kind of the whole purpose for our company. So Use Junior is a tool with different it is a tool with that can access or use other tools, other subroutines, and probably the core feature of Use Junior is that a user of the tool can ask for a document to be reviewed against, say, a checklist or a playbook, much like other tools. But we can call the Use Junior tool through email, but by emailing the inbox that is controlled by this AI tool. And so this allows review to be done asynchronously. A document comes in, you can forward it to Junior at usejunior.com if you are on our whitelist, if you're a user. And it's not an instant reply. It takes like 5 minutes sometimes. But the amount of time required to initiate Junior is pretty brief, and it's the same amount of time that would be required to get to ask someone to help, to ask a human to help with the task. There are other tools like redlining one document against another and comparing them, or checking a document against a term sheet. So similar to other tools, but the thing is that you can call it asynchronously. You can call multiple instances of it. You can have 3 versions running at once by sending 3 emails in quick succession. So it allows you to kind of offload some tasks to an AI tool, and you don't have to know how to use AI. You just have to know how to use email. It's myself and my co-founder David, who I know we were classmates at MIT. We worked together on a research project for the U.S. Army, funded by the U.S. Army, and my brother, who spent several years as a software developer at Bloomberg. And then we've had some dedicated resources at independent contractor Work Street that's been helping with data security. And so we kind of contract with people as needed experts, but we try to keep the operation pretty lean.
So you said something interesting there, that in order to use the tool, you don't have to know how to use AI, you just have to know how to use email. So is it fair to say that it's a very natural language focused model, and lawyers don't have to spend a ton of time learning the best prompts? They can kind of just type out an email as they normally would, and the tool is able to figure out, inferences of what they mean? Or how do you deal with the prompt issue?
That's exactly it. It's, you interact with Junior the same way you'd interact with a person. Our view, and we've taken this, we took this phrase from Apple, but if you need a user manual to use Junior, then our design has failed. We shouldn't put any burden on the user to understand how to use our tool. We don't put AI anywhere in our name. We are an AI company, and we're transparent about that. But AI should not be the draw to this tool. The draw to this tool is that it helps make the lawyer's life a little bit easier. In particular, use cases like you're on an M&A deal and you get a revised draft from opposing counsel at midnight on your cab ride home from the office. And instead of having to stay up until 3 a.m, maybe you forward that email to Junior, the original and the revised, and then by the time you arrive at home, you have the beginning of a write-up, and with citations, so you can click in and verify. So our tool is designed to be able to be called quickly, and work in the background, so that when you are really jammed for time, you can load balance with the AI. But if you have time, you can continue to use your existing workflow.
Very cool. Well, I do have some more questions about AI, but before we get there, I promise this is the last question about you specifically, but I really wanted to get your thoughts on a different topic, which is law school and the current model of law school, because you went to Harvard Law School not that long ago. Of course, we know Harvard Law is ranked consistently in the top 3 law schools in the country. And we recently had a guest on talking about how the current law school model is not really going to serve kids when they get out into the real world, because the pipeline and the model of big law may or may not be there in a few years, and how this could be an opportunity for a realignment of what we consider a good legal education, which is obviously a big factor and a draw to places like Harvard. So any general thoughts on that and what you think might happen to law schools going forward?
That's a tough question. And, it's not one that I have an answer to. I will say I'm very sympathetic to young lawyers. I think maybe some of the most spirited feedback we've gotten online has been from young people, and related to their view on what this will do to the industry. I'll say that we come at this from a place where we want to make people's lives better. We want people to be able to spend time with their families, be able to not have to stay up until 3 a.m. in the morning. I don't know, and I can't control how these tools will be used and how it will affect staffing. We want there to be opportunities for young lawyers, and we actually think young lawyers who adopt tools like this will be well positioned. I know that might not be a very, very satisfying answer, but in some sense, the kind of labor force questions kind of above my pay grade.
No, that's totally fair. I really was asking out of my own curiosity, because I don't often talk to folks who went to MIT and then Harvard Law School. But yeah, totally fair. I mean, no one really has the answer. I think time will tell, and it's going to be an evolution for sure. We'll pause there for a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about things AI tools cannot do today and the importance of security in legal tech.
Did you know there are more than 400,000 law firms in the U.S.? It's no surprise that nearly every firm is looking for a competitive edge. And that's why forward-looking firms are turning to the Allrise Law Practice Management Platform. Allrise is a modular, cloud-hosted software solution deeply integrated with Microsoft Dynamics technology and powered by Copilot AI. It can be deployed as a single, seamlessly integrated system, or you can start with just one module at a time, your choice. But if you want to streamline internal operations, boost staff productivity, deliver superior client service, and rise above all that competitive noise, then take a close look at Allrise. It's time to experience software innovation that enables practice excellence. Learn more at allrise.ai.
And we're back. So I want to move to some of the questions about back to AI. And we often think of AI as sort of this robotic tool, right? It's data in, it's data out, it's very objective. But there has been some talk recently about AI models actually developing their own value system. So talk to us about what that means and if you've seen that and how that might play out in the legal industry.
Yeah. So, we saw a research paper where people took some pretty rigorous methods to be able to tease out kind of an implied value system that AI has seems to have developed, and it's kind of coherent, and it seems to basically skew value towards regions where the people, the human individuals training the AI tend to reside. I think that this risk is mainly theoretical. I mean, it's interesting, and it is real. I think, but the reason why we flagged it is just so that I think the best way to address these problems are just to provide some visibility and to think about them. One interesting use case that's it's more of our use than I would have expected is folks who want to be folks who are finders of fact. Arbitrators can use this tool to consider both sides of an argument, and so we bring this up for our users who are triers of fact, so that they can keep it. And of course they know this already, but that this is just something to be mindful of, that there's no systematic bias being introduced. We haven't seen any evidence of that in our own use cases, but it's an interesting point.
Yeah. So when we talk about AI in the legal space, we often hear about tools, including tools like yours, that can do 90% of the work, 95% of the work. What, in your experience, is that remaining 5 to 10% that AI is not able to do today that still has to be done by a lawyer?
Yeah, I would say that it varies by task. Some simpler tasks, like putting together a roster of lawyers on a deal based on kind of their names, or generating a due diligence request list, you might get more than 95% in the first pass, compared to the output of the person at the firm who would likely be doing the task. But then others, like a purchase agreement, is probably the one where we see the largest gap. And I would say that handling context is difficult for AI. As a lawyer who you're representing and what their objectives are, and that might not be all in context. Now, the nice thing is, since we operate over email, the AI reads the email chain and gathers some context. But if something happened on a phone call, that you'd have to type that in, and so you wouldn't know that. And then one finer point is that it doesn't have the same dexterity as a human when it's editing a document. So it might over-indent or apply the wrong formatting to a document, which sounds minor, but if it's a 100-page document, it's outputting, going through, and most AI models can't do underlining. which is interesting. Ours actually can. Still not 100%, but going through and re-underlining every heading would be very time consuming. So it's not trivial. And I think if you want to see this in a picture says 1,000 words, if you want to see an image of this, Karpathy, one of these leading researchers, he does this test where he asks the AI to sketch using vector graphics an image of a unicorn. Okay, something that's trivial for an elementary schooler, right? AI has difficulty sketching a simple shape when it has to actually draw the vectors itself. And so you can kind of see it looks like a third grader drew it. And that, I think, is a measure of the AI's dexterity, the ability to place something in the particular location it's supposed to be. When it's just streaming text, that's not very apparent. But when you actually start to ask it, all right, replace paragraph 15 with this text, then maybe the spacing between paragraphs can be off. But okay, that's like very technical. Big picture, yeah, I think talking with clients, understanding their objectives, making sure all the relevant context is provided, and then fact checking. Still, it's not as big of an issue. Hallucination is not as big of an issue as it used to be. People hardly talk about it anymore. I hardly see it. But those are occasionally issues too. To be clear, we are not in the business. We don't like using the R word here. We're not in the business of replacing anyone. Everything we do is human in the loop, to improve people's productivity, and not just productivity, the quality of life. That they don't have to be the one up until 3 a.m. They're not having to pull multiple all-nighters in a week. Sometimes, I guess, maybe to engineers, lawyers might not be the most sympathetic cast of characters, based on their kind of maybe pop culture understanding of what it's like to be a lawyer. But day to day, I mean, having to work straight through the night multiple times in a week, which is not uncommon in M&A. I mean, if I can do something so that someone can have 6 hours of sleep instead of 3 or none, I think there's value to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked on the show about lawyer burnout, which is very real, and how hopefully AI can help with some of that instead of just resulting in lawyers taking on more and more and more. But that is a whole different can of worms for another day. I do want to pick up on kind of a theme that you talked about in this, context dexterity, the idea of memory with AI tools. So, I mean, the average person who uses ChatGPT or Claude or whatever types in a prompt, moves on to the next thing, comes back, types in a different prompt. So we don't really often think about the memory that these models have. And you recently wrote about this concept of AI models with extensive working memory. So can you talk a little bit about what does that mean exactly and why it's important in the legal context?
Yeah. So, excellent question. I think the context window was one of the missing pieces that prevented the early AI models from being useful. Google's Gemini models have the best coherent context window working memory. So this simply means, how many facts, how many words are available to the AI, to the language model when it is generating its output. And so to give you a good example, if a document is 100 pages long and you're editing it, let's say, or you're summarizing it, but and if your context window can only hold 50 pages, right, then you can't answer a question about that 100 pages in one pass. And you can obviously split up a document into smaller pieces and ask the question against the different parts and then put it together. But that's just not very, that requires extra tooling. What if the answer is on a boundary point between two chunks and then like you need to read them together? For instance, what if a term is used at the end of the agreement and it references a definition at the beginning? And so you'd have to understand the interplay between those two parts in order to understand the significance, like the meaning might not be in any one part. Or if you want to review an entire document across a consistent set of, let's say, you want to prioritize if the average importance of changes in one part of the document is different than the average importance in another part of the document, your baseline importance score is actually is on a different scale in your different parts. Maybe that's a little bit too technical, but it's the idea of, imagine working with someone who can only remember the last 50 pages that they read, and asking them a question about a 250-page document. They would have to take notes as they go and refer back, and it's just more process, more tooling, and it's slightly lower quality output without sufficiently large memory. And now you can get to the point where you have memories that are so long that it's effectively infinite to the user, and then you could see value there. You don't have to remind the AI what it was doing.
Zooming out for a second and looking at all of the tools that lawyers have available today already, it seems like everyone's launching an AI feature. Bloomberg Law just announced an AI tool. LexisNexis has an AI assistant. Is that sort of a sustainable model? Do you think of each company having these different assistants, and we just learn to use different assistants depending on what we're doing? Or do you see some of these eventually falling away in favor of something else?
Yeah, interesting. Good question. From the perspective of the providers, right? Established providers like Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis and Bloomberg Law, we have respect for all of them. I could flip the question, and is it sustainable for them to not offer their own tool? Right? Because if they don't, then they're kind of driving the users into the hands of the other providers. So, in some sense, and then the cost to serve these tools, is probably low. It's lower than the cost of losing users. So it's kind of too expensive to not offer your own tool. Then from the user perspective, is it worthwhile to the user to use all three tools? Well, it depends. We commonly see four or more tools being used by a particular firm, and different tools have stronger use cases. We actually see these other providers as making useful contributions to the ecosystem. We think folks like a Harvey provide useful things, like a DraftWise provide useful things. Riseware, I haven't personally used it, but I think that they all provide in Kira, for change of control review. I think they all provide something. I haven't used all of these tools that you referenced from. Not yet, from Thomson Reuters and Westlaw and Bloomberg. I have used Bloomberg's transaction analyzer. I thought it provides a lot of value, and it can help with benchmarking.
I want to ask you a question about security, and mostly because your website has one of the most transparent security disclosures. If you're listening to this, go to your computer and go to usejunior.com and check out their trust center. You list all of the control you use, all of the sub-processors, when the last update was. Tell us why you decided to disclose all of this, and do you think that should be a standard in the legal tech industry?
Yeah, so we take security very seriously because it's what our customers care about. They, attorney-client privilege has to be preserved and protected, and that's just non-negotiable. And so that was after the code was working in production and all in the cloud. Our number one priority was ISO 27001 compliance and SOC 2 compliance. Yeah, we think that this should be something that is adopted across the industry, and we go beyond even what is just required for those standards. We also have a prompt logging exception from Google, from Google Gemini. So our prompts aren't even retained by Google. So you don't have to worry about Google employees accessing the prompts, and we delete our email conversations every 45 minutes. And so we take security very seriously for protecting the privileged communications.
So, in closing, I want to end with two forward-looking questions. And the first is, what is next for you? Will there be other products related to Use Junior? Are you considering going back to practicing law? What's sort of on your horizon?
Yeah, I am not. I am not going to leave this company until these problems are solved. The problem of not having a way that the average user doesn't really have a convenient way to access AI and get the benefit of AI in their workflow, and adoption has to be, we to those who want to adopt, the ability to use these tools has to be more widely distributed, just to give everyone the benefit of the quality of life and quality improvement of the tool. So, we're prepared to spend as many years as it takes, and we're very thankful that Google and Microsoft have provided support with server expenses. So we are prepared and able to continue this project for as many years as it takes to really reach strong market adoption.
And second forward-looking question, we always, with our tech-focused guests, end with a predictions question. So what is your prediction on what the legal industry will look like 5-10 years from now? And we won't hold you to this, so it doesn't have to be a reasonable prediction either.
No, feel free to hold me to this. Paul Graham from Y Combinator, he has this hypothetical, which is, imagine that you're already 5 or 10 years in the future and think about what would look kind of ridiculous in retrospect. And that's actually a pretty good way to predict the future. And I think the one feature that would look the most ridiculous to forego today, looking in retrospect, is probably checks, like like term sheet checks that can be provided by AI. For instance, does this contract match the term sheet? Right, you've just spent a lot of time, let's say, just spend a lot of time drafting a contract to match a term sheet. You're about to send it to the client. It's like, have you actually just sent an email to the AI with the term sheet and the contract attached and said, hey, do these match? And it comes back in 5 minutes with a term sheet compliance check, and it costs you really next to nothing. It'll kind of seem irresponsible to have sent contracts out of the firm without having had the AI at least check it for quality. And I think within 5 years, it's just going to seem like irresponsible to not use these tools.
Yeah, I really like that framing, because we often hear about the risks of using AI tools because of hallucinations and things like that. But I love the reframing of, in the future, the risk will actually be not running things through an AI tool. So, 5-10 years from now, we will see if that prediction holds true. Stephen, thank you so much for being here. What is the best way listeners can find you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, they can access our website, usejunior.com, USEJUNIOR.com, and they can email me at stephen@usejunior.com or use our website to book a demo.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Stephen for being with us, and thank you all for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening, and join us again for another Rule of Law podcast from All Rise.